You know what you're listening to?
Is that a trick question?
It's the I Still Love This Game podcast with your host, Matthew Damian.
He's an idiot. Don't listen to this. He's an idiot.
Hello and welcome to episode 42 of the I Still Love This Game podcast. All three games today featured quite a lot of drama and there's lots to talk about. But I wanted to begin today's show with the Heat and Philly game, 2 from yesterday. And more specifically, I wanted to talk about Dwayne Wade's performance. And after that performance, I couldn't help but think back to, and I couldn't get this out of my mind, that quote from Rudy Tomjanovich after the Rockets won their second championship in '95. They were the number 6 seed. And everybody counted them out. Nobody expected them to even get out of the first round. And they were the defending champions. And after they won the championship, after they swept the Orlando Magic, Rudy Tomjanovich got up on the microphone. He said, "Never underestimate the heart of a champion." And I tell you what, Dwayne Wade looked every bit of a champion last night. What a performance. I haven't seen him play with that kind of intensity and focus since Game 4 of the 2013 NBA Finals. And I know some of you might be thinking, wait, hold on a second, what about the 2016 Finals when he pretty much dragged an injury-depleted Miami Heat team to within one game of the conference finals? And that's a fair enough point because he played fantastic during that run. I think in Game 3 of the conference semis against the Raptors, he had 20 points in the third quarter. But in that run, he was cerebral. He pick and chose his spots much better. This was just, I have to stop this run by Philly. And in the first quarter, Philly was looking unstoppable. Olynyk was actually playing the best for Miami once again. He looked the most dangerous for them. And Wade completely turned this entire series on its head in the second quarter with 20 points in the second quarter. But the most impressive part, to me at least, was what he did in the fourth quarter. Because Philly was surging in the fourth quarter. Miami jumped out to a big lead in the third quarter and also in the fourth quarter. But then Philly made their run. They made their move and they were coming right back. And they were only down by 2. Dwayne Wade comes back in. I don't know who he ripped the ball from. It might have been Saric. It might have been Ilyasova. I can't remember. But he just completely ripped the ball and took it in for a dunk. He got offensive rebounds. And then he hit that huge final shot over Ben Simmons to seal that victory up. That was incredible. That was Allen Iverson in 2001. That was Michael Jordan in the 93 finals, or the 97 finals, or the 91 finals, or the 98 finals, the 92 finals, any finals except for 96. The rarest of offensive talents have this ability to change the momentum and the direction, not just of a quarter, not just of a game, but of an entire series. And I'm struggling to put it into words how awesome that was to watch. I can't overstate it. And the only thing that I can really think of is that this is what makes basketball such a beautiful sport to watch. This is what makes the playoffs the best time of the year. Because just look at Game 1, Philly blows out Miami. It doesn't even look close. There's no contest between the two teams, right? And then Game 2, who would have picked Dwayne Wade of all people? Dwayne Wade was on the scrap heap before the season started, and then he went to Cleveland for essentially nothing. Then he was traded for a second-round pick, and yet all of a sudden he's turned back the clock, and at least for one game, even if it's just one game, for one game he's turned this series on the head. And this series is alive now, and it's competitive now because of Dwayne Wade. This is why basketball is amazing. And this is why I do the podcast, because I love talking about it. I love watching this stuff and sitting down and ranking this, because the gut check moments, and we've got so many more that are coming up. Even in this series, we have more gut check moments. The next game's going to be a gut check moment. It's going to be for Philly this time, because the pressure is firmly on Philly's shoulders. They just allowed a 36-year-old to steal a game from them. And with it, they also took the home court advantage. The 76ers are an inexperienced team. So, of course, there's going to be questions about whether they're going to panic. Now, I don't think that they will panic, but I do think their confidence will have taken a hit. And Miami responded to their gut check, and now it's Philly's turn. And this is the beauty of the playoffs. This is why I love this time of the year. And there has been no better example of the unpredictability and the roller coaster ride of the playoffs than the Pelicans and Blazers. And I said in the previous episode to expect fireworks, and this game delivered big time. And of course, everyone's going to talk about Drew Holiday. Now it's time for people to stop talking about Drew Holiday as the best kept secret, and start talking about him and where he is in terms of the top guards in the NBA this year. Look, if we just went off this season and the first 2 games of this playoff series, it's hard to argue that he's not worthy of a Supermax deal. He has played that well on both sides of the floor. It has been incredible. And I heard Brent Barry on the broadcast today saying that he actually voted him for All-NBA first team defense. I've got no arguments with that whatsoever. And he's scoring, career highs on the offensive end. And this is going up against 2 of the better guards in the NBA right now. Maybe not on the defensive end, but in terms of sheer offensive talent, there's maybe 1 or 2 backcourts that are better than CJ McCollum and Damian Lillard. And he is, along with Rondo, they put the clamps on these guys. Damian Lillard, who had a wonderful season, he was 7 of 18 with 7 turnovers. And the most depressing thing if you're a Portland fan is that's not even their biggest concern. It has to be rebounding. Portland actually came out in this game and they were dominating the glass. So they had 10 offensive rebounds in the first half and they took a lead into halftime. Nurkic was then injured, and for whatever reason, Ed Davis, who's by far and away is their best rebounder, he only played 20 minutes. And down the stretch, they opted to go with Collins over Ed Davis. Are you kidding me? I can't even remember Portland getting a defensive rebound in the last 3 minutes. And of course, if you got a situation like that, there's no surprise that they lost again. The only guy that really stepped up on the glass for Portland was Chief, Al-Farouq Amino. But you need more than just one rebounder. And this, of course, is compounded when you're going up against a team like New Orleans that has such rebounding firepower across the board. Think of it this way. Rajon Rondo, their starting point guard, still got 10 rebounds. They have so much rebounding talent, and Portland wants to somehow nullify that by having one rebounder on the floor. Wilt Chamberlain said it best when he was talking about the importance of rebounding, is you can't score without the ball. So you can have all the shooters in the world, but if you can't rebound the basketball, what good is that? you can't get your hands on the ball. It doesn't matter if you got great shooters and guys that can score on the other end. You need to get the basketball to do those things. And down the stretch, Portland couldn't get their hands on the ball. There was one possession where there was 3 offensive rebounds, and it was capped off with a Rondo, of all people, wide open 3 because Portland just died. They just ran out of energy. They were defending for about a minute, and that capped the 9-0 run, and the game was over, and maybe the series is over. Which, of course, takes us into the next question, and it's the obvious one. Is Portland done? It's impossible to ignore an 0-2 hole, especially when 3 of the next 4 are in New Orleans. The basic mathematics of this is Portland has to win 2 out of those 3 games in New Orleans. If they don't, it's over. Now, the good news is nobody expects them to win or even to extend the series. So all the pressure is on New Orleans to take care of business. We haven't seen the Pelicans in this position before, so much like Philly, it's going to be interesting because we don't know how they're going to respond. But what'll also be interesting is to see how Lillard responds. These are the kind of moments where superstars and franchise players, they have to step up. When a team is down like this, the only way to get out of that hole is by being aggressive. This is the same with all sports. If you're a boxer and you're down in the 8th round and you're behind by points, you have to start throwing haymakers. You have to start winning, not only winning rounds, but going for the knockout. And you do that by being aggressive. Portland has to do the same things. They have to start controlling tempo. They have to start dictating the pace. All that being said, I think Portland can extend this series. We might be able to see 6 games, but I think that's it. I think they're done. When a team loses the first 2 games at home in a playoff series, it's not good. Sometimes you can get away with it. Sometimes if it's like a 1 versus 8 seed, like Phoenix versus the Lakers in 93, or you can luck out like the Celtics did against the Bulls when Rondo got hurt last year. And then, of course, you can come back from that. But that's when there's a big talent discrepancy. there's not a huge talent discrepancy, even though it's a 3 seed versus a 6 seed. This is much, much closer. It's much closer than what a 4 versus 5 usually is. The only way that New Orleans can get derailed is if they get ahead of themselves. If they start thinking the series is over. And then they could be in trouble. But I'll say this. I've been quite critical of Alvin Gentry the last few seasons. I thought New Orleans made a mistake by letting Monty Williams go. Not anymore. He's had a hell of a career. And in fact, if you look back at my awards for the past season, I didn't even mention his name for Coach of the Year. How wrong was I? He is definitely a candidate for Coach of the Year. Losing DeMarcus Cousins, bringing in a bunch of fresh players, getting the most out of Drew Holiday, bringing back Anthony Davis into MVP candidate form. He's had a great season as a coach, and he's completely outcoached Terry Scott so far. And we all thought he was a Coach of the Year candidate. I don't think New Orleans gets ahead of themselves, and I think we get a great series in the next round between Golden State Warriors. He will be coaching against his old team, a lot of his former players. He will know that team pretty well. And quite honestly, I expect him to outcoach Steve Kerr as well. Now, if they have the firepower to get over the line against Golden State, that's another question altogether. But I think Alvin Gentry will outcoach Steve Kerr in a 7-game series. Now let's swing back to the Eastern Conference and have a look at the Celtics and Bucks in Game 2. Now, before the playoffs started, I did pick Milwaukee to win despite them being the 7 seed going up against the 2 seed Boston. And the reason I went with Milwaukee was I didn't think a team that was young and overmatched in terms of talent could win 4 out of 7 games. But now we're seeing Jaylen Brown emerge as a genuine all-star level player and has been complemented by Tatum, Horford, Morris, Rozier, and Larkham. And the energy that Boston is playing has been the difference. The reason why I'm still hesitant to say that this series is over is because I'm not sure if Boston will have that kind of energy level going on the road. Playing at home, they get a genuine lift playing in front of that Celtics home crew. But if they are able to match the intensity and the energy levels that they were playing at home on the road, this series is over. Milwaukee is such a badly coached team. You look at the talent on both these teams, they have the best player, they have more depth. It comes down to coaching, and they are so badly coached. They're lost. They are completely lost. They don't understand what their advantages are. They don't know what to look for on offense. Bledsoe's out there running around with like a chicken with his head cut off. He's got no idea what's happening. He's getting torn up by both Rozier and Larkham. They're getting good production out of Middleton and Giannis, but they just got blown out in Game 2, and they're down 2-0 to a team that I can't even describe this Celtics. I love to watch them. I don't want to sound like I'm, disrespecting them, but let's be honest, this team, there's no way this team should make it to the second round. But if they do make it to the second round, and let's just assume they do make it, and Philly makes it, how sweet would a Boston and Philly, forget the rivalry for a second, but how sweet would a Boston and Philly matchup be this year? And just young players that don't know any better going up against each other. Maybe the two most exciting young duos in the NBA right now, in Embiid and Simmons versus Brown and Tatum. Plus, great coaching on both sides. You have to give the advantage to Brad Stevens, but Brett Brown's not a bad coach either. I should know this. He was a coach of the Australian team for a while. And on top of that, their supporting cast really complement those duos as well. And it would be a fun series. It would be a great series. It would be a long series. And it would be exciting because you wouldn't know who's going to show up and who's going to dominate out of those. It's almost like pick-up basketball at that stage. And the great thing is, I don't think any of those players know how good they potentially can be. So there's a good testing, there's a good barometer for them as well. I know I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself, but there's not too much more to talk about in this series. If Milwaukee continues to get slapped around from a coaching standpoint, and they can't raise their energy levels despite being down 2-0 I'll get this sentence out at some point. Let me start again. If they can't, they're down 2-0. They have to, just like Portland has to, they have to win 4 of the next 5. Now, luckily for them, 3 of the next 4 are in Milwaukee. But they need to, there's no excuse for being run off the court from an energy standpoint. And coaching-wise, I don't know if they can fix that. Despite the talent advantage they have, I don't think they can overcome the differences in coaching. I think Brad Stevens is that far ahead. I don't even know the name of the Milwaukee Bucks coach. I still can't get over the fact that they got rid of Jason Kidd halfway through the season. Did anybody actually find out why Jason Kidd was fired? Was it because the team wasn't living up to expectations? Because they sure as hell aren't living up to expectations right now. This team should, by all intents and purposes, even though they're the 7th seed, when you look at the talent, they have by far, well, maybe not by far anymore, but they have the best player on this side of the bracket. They should be going to the conference finals. Instead, it looks like they might get swept out of the first round by a team with one questionable all-star in Al Horford, although I had no problems, but he seemed to be the most controversial all-star picked, and a bunch of, second-year and rookie players or role players that not a whole lot of other teams wanted. That's unforgivable. And they got rid of Jason Kidd for underproducing. Are you serious? The final game that I wanted to talk about was the Raptors and Wizards game too. And the question running around in my head right now is, how big of a blowout would this have been had it not been for Ty Lawson? And what are the odds that we would have said that heading to that series? I didn't even know that Ty Lawson was on their roster. I probably should have checked it, right? But he had a great game. But if he can look good in this system, in Washington's system, how much of it is a mirage that we're seeing with John Wall and his numbers and his productions? Because let's be honest, his tenure has not produced a whole lot of winning. They've won 1 playoff series, or 2, sorry. And they won 1 last year as well. They also beat Toronto in 2015. But beyond that, it's all about his numbers and his profile. But if his numbers and profile are inflated because of the system that is Washington, then maybe it's time to move on from the John Wall era. Unless if they enjoy mediocrity, then he's your man. Anyway, let's get back to the game. And Toronto looked unstoppable in the first half, and the Wizards looked like they were completely on the back foot. To the Wizards' credit, though, they did make a late push, but that's not the Raptors losing focus, because when you look at the Wizards, they do have quite a talented team. This is not a typical 1 versus 8 in the Western Conference. This is not the Brooklyn Nets with 35 wins or 36 wins. This team is pretty loaded when it comes to talent. I've said this quite a few times. And the more that Toronto wins, even if some of the games are close, that's not an indication of them losing focus. That's an indication of them getting through a pretty talented team. But if you're Toronto, you can't be satisfied with being up 2-0, just like you can't be satisfied being 1-0. And anything less than a split in DC will be a disappointment for Toronto. They have a shot to really put the knife into Washington and end this quickly. They've got to take that. Because much like some of the younger teams out there, whether it's New Orleans or Philadelphia or even Boston, Toronto has to gain some confidence themselves, even though they're a veteran team. The only experience they've had has been of playoff disasters and underachieving. So they have to prove to themselves that they are capable of doing it. And the best way to exercise those demons would be a sweep or a 5-game series. Also, you've got to keep in mind that what's waiting for them in the second round is still likely the Cavs. Even though the Pacers completely demolished them in Game 1, I don't think anybody's really expecting the Pacers to win that series. It's going to be a much longer series than we thought, but we're still expecting the Cavs to get through it. What will be the mindset for Toronto if Washington wins the next 2 games and all of a sudden this goes to a 7-game series and they barely get through it, despite having a 2-0 lead now? They cannot play with fire like this. The Raptors need to take care of this series, and they need to take care of it quickly. Just like I took care of this podcast really, really quickly. Under 20 minutes, baby. Oh, I forgot to talk about the Spurs and Warriors. The Warriors won. What else is there to say? I mean, that's clearly the least interesting series going on. All the drama for that series is off the court, and I've said what I've had to say about the Popovich and Kawhi Leonard situation. I think Kawhi Leonard will be gone by the by the start of next season. And I think this will be a stain on Popovich's legacy, as it should be. And questions will be asked as to who was really keeping or created the Spurs culture of brilliance and excellence. This is a question nobody was asking. It was always Popovich it was attributed to. But I think serious questions should be raised about that now, because this has all fallen apart when once Tim Duncan retired. Hell, maybe that's why Tim Duncan retired so quickly. He saw the writing on the wall with some of these players, whether it was LaMarcus Aldridge or Kawhi Leonard, that, hey, maybe Popovich won't be able to control and manipulate them the way that he's been able to do with Manu and Tony Parker. So he got out of there. It was a very quick decision by Tim Duncan, and we thought, well, maybe that's just the way he is, kind of like John Stockton. John Stockton had a very a quick retirement speech at the end of a playoff game. It wasn't even a press conference. It was just a couple of interviewers standing outside the locker room, and he basically said he retired. And then, of course, Karl Malone went to the Lakers after that. But yeah, Tim Duncan just it was like a midnight retirement. And then all of a sudden, we were like, well, okay, that was interesting. But we expected the Spurs culture to maintain its standard, at least from a winning standpoint. And we haven't seen that. And that's with Popovich clearly behind the wheel of it. So I think it's all on him. Anyway, that series is really boring, so I just wanted to talk about something to get it over the 20-minute mark. Thanks so much for listening, guys. Episode 42 in the books. I've got to see who's playing tomorrow so I can give you some predictions, although I'm probably going to be wrong with them again. So I will be right back. Well, we got 3 really good games. We got the Pacers and Cavs. I expect the Cavs to come out. They cannot lose this game. If they lose this game, then yeah, I think that we really have to start entertaining the thought that they're not getting out of the first round of the playoffs. But I hope that they will, just for LeBron's legacy. The whole argument with him and Jordan, one of the major points for LeBron is the fact that he's never lost in the first round. And wouldn't it be interesting to see how they'll try to justify that one? Because this has apparently been his best season, right? Or his most impressive season. And then he loses in the first round to the Pacers? Okay. The next game is the Utah Jazz versus the Oklahoma City Thunder. That should be interesting. And I want to see how Utah responds to their shooters. And it places them in a pretty difficult position, because if you press up on Paul George, if you press up on Russell Westbrook, they will go right by you. And if they go right by you, yeah, you've got Rudy Gobert at the front of the rim. That's fair enough. But if Rudy Gobert is challenging him, one of 2 things could happen. Or one of 3 things. The first one is he blocks a shot. The second thing is he commits a foul and he gets into foul trouble. Or the third thing is he goes for the shot, alters it, but he's out of the play now because he's had to leave his man, and that opens up Steven Adams, who may be the best offensive rebounder in the NBA right now. And that's a situation that you don't want to allow Oklahoma to get a lot of offensive boards. So that should be interesting how that gets played out. Do they continue to give Oklahoma clean looks from 3? Because if they do, that's playing with fire, as we saw in Game 1. I think Oklahoma goes up 2-0 in that series, though. And the final game of the evening is the Minnesota Timberwolves versus the Houston Rockets. I think Minnesota will put the clamps on James Harden a little bit more. I still think he gets between the 30 to 35 point range. But you see the other players, the Chris Pauls, the Trevor Ariza's, the Eric Gordons, they step up. I'd like to see some defensive adjustments from Minnesota, especially when they consider Thibodeau to be such a guru on the defensive end. So let's see if they put someone else on Capella, because it was clear that Karl Anthony Towns just was overmatched from an athletic standpoint. So let's see what happens there, but I think that Houston goes up 2-0 in that series as well. So as it's been the case throughout the playoffs so far, you probably expect me to get 2 out of those 3 wrong. So you'll probably get the Cavs tying the series at 1, and you get the other 2 teams, Utah and Minnesota, winning. So we've got a bunch of 1-1 series, which is fine by me. I'll happily take it. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for listening. Enjoy the games. There'll be a podcast after the games tomorrow as well. And take care.